I am interviewing Stefan Carpenter. He has a background in environmental policy, public policy, political science, and law. As we had talked briefly about whether or not people do the right thing if they're not forced to. And some of your papers really talk right about that. In your bio, it says you have an interest in the role of public awareness. What makes people do the right thing, or what makes them take action to help wildlife? So what is your focus?
In the U.S. and Europe, a lot of the conflict animals have been taken care of. And I mean that in air quotes, right?
Yeah.
We don't have wolves. I hope you can't hear my dog, by the way, who's going nuts at somebody.
I can, but you know what? The show is called Music, Animals, and the Environment, so we got animals.
So we've taken care of, there are no more, other than maybe the occasional vagrants. We don't have any mountain lions on the East Coast. We don't have any wolves on the East Coast, right? We've taken care of a lot of the problem animals. And so where you find a lot of this stuff happens to be in Africa and Asia, and to some extent down in Latin America. But I'm interested in the issue more broadly. I happen to have some background experience already in Namibia. And when I was getting my PhD, there was somebody who did a lot of work in Eastern Africa as well. So I got involved there as well. There's some fascinating stuff going on from a human-wildlife conflict standpoint, and I can explain what that is in a second.
Please.
But fundamentally, the issues are not limited to there. They're found anywhere you have wildlife. So what human-wildlife is, it's where interests of humans and wildlife conflict, and there's tension there. The way that it tends to be used is an operational term. It looks more at where wildlife negatively impacts people. Obviously, I hit an armadillo with my car. From an armadillo standpoint,
and
that's a fair degree of conflict.
Right?
I'm based in kind of central Florida, about an hour north of Florida Gulf Coast University.
You have armadillos.
I mean, there's armadillos lots of places, but an armadillo hits my car, and other than me needing to wipe down my bumper, it doesn't mean much to me. It obviously means a great deal to that armadillo. But we wouldn't tend to use that as a conflict. Where you tend to get the term human-wildlife conflict is more that animal is doing something that conflicts with my needs and has some tangible impact on me.
Human-oriented. The stress is on the human.
The reason why I'll give a couple examples. If I have livestock and a wolf or some predator takes one of my livestock, that is human-wildlife conflict. Birds, deer, whatever that graze on people's crops, it can get down to insects. We don't tend to think of it that way much, but a locust swarm, that's pretty conflicty. The reason we tend to look at it from a human standpoint is humans oftentimes retaliate, right? There's either preventative killing. There's a coyote wandering around. I'm worried it's going to eat my dog. I'm going to take care of it before it has a chance to do that. The wolf comes in and eats a cow, and I'm going to take care of that wolf. Right. It has no business doing that.
It's an interesting word, retaliate, because it's kind of an emotional word.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
And people tend to anthropomorphize or whatever. So people tend to ascribe human intention to wildlife. Most people aren't anti-wildlife in the wild. People don't think of where they live as being wild unless they're intentionally choosing a place for that, right? I walked out this morning and there's a coyote on my driveway. It doesn't bother me. I'm kind of a wildlife guy. I'm like, oh, cool. But people around you start freaking out. Like, well, what's it doing here? This is a neighborhood. It doesn't belong here.
It's fascinating because who doesn't belong there? That coyote has been there since the beginning of time.
Actually, it's funny. The coyotes filled a niche that people have created in this area. Coyotes didn't used to exist in Florida. The red wolf was there and kept coyotes out. Coyotes have spread to fill in an ecological void left by us wiping out all the other predators.
The red wolf was driven to extinction.
Functionally extinct.
In the wild.
There was a reintroduction effort in North Carolina. At one point, it was up to a few hundred individuals in the wild. There was a breeding. So that I'm going to put a giant asterisk beside this and say that there's a great deal of debate among geneticists about whether the red wolf is actually a wolf or if it's a wolf-coyote hybrid. But right now, according to the endangered species list, the red wolf is a wolf subspecies. Yeah, they were rounded up. All remaining wild ones were captured. They did purity tests, found pure-blooded red wolves, and then bred them and released them. And that did well until it didn't. And North Carolina pushed back. And to the best of my knowledge, there's less than 20 left in the wild. So we're probably going to have them go extinct in the wild a second time. But let's step back, right? So there's this idea that things are invading like, I'm not going in and bothering them. Why are they coming in and bothering me? And that ascribes a awareness
Or malice on the part of the animal.
Rather than, look, I'm an animal and my job here is to find food. And oh, look, there's some easy food. Like all of us would make that choice given the same circumstance. But there's a sense that it's somehow an invasionary thing. And so the term retaliation, there's a huge amount of emotion that goes into it. I don't say that to minimize the human side. If I were a rancher and that's my livelihood and I walk out and something's killing my cattle, I'm understandably going to be furious, right? And I'm going to take care of it. So I'm not trying to paint any side as wrong, but there's a ton of stuff that gets wrapped up in human-wildlife conflict.
It's interesting how people may look at an animal and question the motivation of the animal. As you said, the animal is just looking for food. I would think that we should be more, we should just be more aware that that's what animals do. We don't need to be emotional about it. Sometimes I see on YouTube and whatnot, these videos go viral. There's a bear in someone's yard, right? Is that a sign that the bear is running out of space, running out of food? Is that a worrying sign? Or a mountain lion? A mountain lion shows up in someone's yard. I always feel like that must be a desperate animal that has just completely run out of food. And that's why it's moved into these suburbs and moved closer and closer to homes. Or is it not that clear cut?
It depends. Some animals are quite happy living alongside people. It may not flow the other way, right? So a lot of times bears become habituated to hanging around where people are because there's easy pickings, right? People don't secure their trash. And so if you're a bear, especially if you're a bear in an area where you need to fatten up for the winter, you're grabbing the easiest calorie source you can, and that might be garbage cans. It doesn't mean that there's not sufficient space out there necessarily, but it's like people who come down to Florida and feed alligators. Well, it doesn't take long before an alligator hangs around where the people are, be food.
Right, absolutely.
It can be that. In some circumstances, we've actually fought, so the deer populations exploded in part because we took away predators and in part because deers like lawns. And what people do is they cut down trees and they make little sort of edge areas where there's grass, and that works well. In some cases, it's because there's maybe not enough space. Or the best case scenario is the species expanding, which is what you want it to do if it's endangered. But where does it go once it taps out its natural areas? What's happening with the Florida panther right now is the populations has rebounded to the extent that you have panthers that have moved out of formal protected areas and they're moving on to ranch lands because that's what's left. So it depends, right? It could be that, or it could just be learned behavior.
Right. I have so many questions, but just quickly about mountain lions and the Florida panther, real quick, like an overview. When someone says mountain lion, they're talking about a puma, a cougar. Is that all the same thing? Puma, cougar?
It's all the same thing. Puma, cougar, catamount, the mountain lion. They're all the same. Panther. That would be another one.
Panther, okay. And in the United States, is a mountain lion in Florida the same as a mountain lion in California, or are they slightly different species?
So with the qualification here that this is not exactly what I do, right? I'm more on the social sciencey side of things. But my understanding is that there are recognized subspecies of panther, catamount. I'm not sure if the Florida panther is technically a different subspecies than on, say, California, but it is.
It's not that important. If you were an expert, there would still be debate, because I last night was looking this up, and the San Diego Zoo website says that these mountain lions are the biggest of the small cats. And then another place it said these are the smallest of the big cats.
Yeah.
A big lynx versus a small lion.
Even if they're not different species, you do get regional differences. The Florida panther's smaller than some of the ones that live up in the Rockies. You tend to find it's in the heat. You need to conserve a ton of body heat.
Right.
And so oftentimes hotter places have generally smaller animals than in really cold places because you want to have as much bulk versus surface area as you can. But anyway, so the listeners know, the Florida panther is basically the last remnant of panthers found on the eastern seaboard, really to the east of the Mississippi with any regularity. It used to be, the Florida panther subpopulation used to basically be more or less the southeast of the U.S., and then you had a northeast different subspecies. There's really no more established populations. Males will walk hundreds of miles. You'll get the occasional male looking for love in all the wrong places, right? Because there's no other animals. Florida panther males have been hit by cars up in Georgia, which is how we know they're up there. But the established population, the only one left in the eastern seaboard is the Florida panther, for a long time constrained down to just the Everglades.
They're beautiful animals. The effort to see their numbers rebound, is that done at the federal level, like the U.S. government allocates land, or is that does the Florida government, the Florida legislature, take the big steps to help the panther rebound?
Okay, so both the U.S. and states have their own set of listing for endangered and threatened. So the Florida panther is on the U.S. endangered species list. There's different ways to get on there. Even if it isn't technically its own subspecies, it's basically what's known as a distinct population. It's unique. And so Florida also has it. Sometimes you can get species that land on state endangered or threatened lists that are not on the federal one because the states look within the geographic boundaries of the state, whereas the U.S. is looking. So you may have a lot of a certain animal, but very little of it in a particular state. So the Florida black bear, for example, was on the list for a while, whereas black bear is not particularly endangered on a federal level. So once you're listed, that puts in place certain protections. It can involve critical habitat and the sort of preservation of critical habitat. It oftentimes involves what you can do that will impact the living animals right now. But generally speaking, it doesn't always require the creation of new land. That is species by species, and it doesn't necessarily result in money being allocated to help the species recover. There's lots of endangered species that have no funding whatsoever, and so what you get is you get kind of the charismatic ones. They get some money, and the skinks of the world don't get a whole lot.
Yeah. And the threat to some of these animals is development, people building communities and suburbs, and they just run out of space, the animals.
It depends. Habitat loss is probably the biggest driver worldwide. Even, one, we love to cut things down and clear stuff, and there's money to be made in clearing out forests, and there's just the way the system's kind of designed. If I buy a plot of land, it's not worth much unless I put cattle on it or I clear it or I do something.
Yeah.
But there are other drivers too. So you can, especially in island areas, a lot of times it's not habitat loss, it's invasive species. Hawaii struggles with that, for example.
Right.
In some places it's over harvesting, right? So think about caviar, right? That causes people to run out and catch certain types of fish. And so, but yeah, habitat fragmentation, where you start carving it up into little bits, and habitat loss are sort of the major drivers globally, and climate change is only going to exacerbate that.
So I want to ask you about the wolf, and I think they just opened hunting. They allowed hunting certain wolves, I think is it Yellowstone or Wyoming or one of the western states that I was hearing about. Do you know anything about that?
A bit. So as long as a species is on the endangered species list on the federal level, you can't do it,
okay,
with some carve-outs. So you can generally, I can shoot a species to save somebody's life. So, the listing of the endangered species is required to look only at the science. But once it's on there, you have to deal with people. So there are a bunch of ranchers. Take Yellowstone, for example, or around Yellowstone. There's a big ranching community. And you say, I'm going to put some wolves in there. And everybody's reaction is, oh, great. And then they're going to wander out and they're going to eat my livestock. And that does happen sometimes.
Yeah.
But predation happens.
Sure.
And so once if a wolf left Yellowstone, it was allowed to be shot anyways, basically as a nuisance animal. Mm-hmm. What you have in some states is where the wolf has been taken off the federal endangered species list. It's not considered threat. There's basically enough wolves. Then management gets turned over to the states. It's basically the state's animals to manage and trust for its people. And so the states can then issue hunting permits just like they can for deer or for any other animal within their boundaries. And so that's where you get these sanctioned wolf hunting seasons, or states have issued permits for people to hunt wolves.